second session of our international seminar on fiscal stability and state policy and recent trends in India. We have Dr. A. Abdul Salim, Professor, Department of Economics, University of Kerala, to chair the session. Sir, I request you to take your position. In this session, we have two presentations. Professor R. V. Ramana Murthy, Professor, School of Economics, University of Hyderabad, will be speaking on economic downturn and economic theory in retrospect. I welcome you, sir. And we have Mr. Anitha V, Researcher, Center for Economic Studies and Planning, Jawaharlal Nehru University, and he will be presenting on fiscal instability in India. Are our deficit figures reveal the truth? Welcome you, sir. And now over to you, the chair.
A very warm good morning to one and all present. So we had a wonderful session, wonderful inaugural session, and on the basis of that we can build on this most important topic, which is hotly discussed for the last few years. Today, already we are late by 20 minutes. We have to wind up this session by 3:15. Two important presenters are there. Professor R. V. Ramana Murthy, Professor, School of Economics, University of Hyderabad, and another paper to be presented by Anitha V, Researcher, Center for Economic Studies and Planning, Jawaharlal Nehru University. On behalf of all of us present here, sir, I welcome you, and also I welcome you for this important event. Now, I don't want to speak much on this very important topic because already time is short. Let us tap our resource persons, and also, finally we should need some time for discussions. Very good resourceful research scholars are there among the dais. We should utilize them also. Sir, I invite you for your presentation on this very important topic on economic downturn and economic theory in retrospect.
Good afternoon, everyone, and at the outset, let me. Good afternoon, everyone, and at the outset, let me thank Mr. Siddik, who has been kind enough to invite me to participate in this conference. And after listening to a most scintillating lecture of Professor Govindrao Garu, perhaps we may only have to go back and reflect on the kind of empirical trends which we are seeing, and at the same time, how do we conceptually understand the crisis, whatever its nature, as well as policy response. So I thought that since I'll be speaking to the students and as a teacher, I have to take back the discussion back to our textbook and see where there are multiple explanations exist, where there are certain explanations have become suppressed, some discourses are suppressed, and how some discourses are active, so that we get a sense of what we study and what we learn in the classrooms will become useful to us, at least to understand what's going on in the reality. I hope that could be a little heroic, but we have to make some. It will be a very simplistic exercise I'm doing, but we have to begin simplistically only to make a beginning. So first part is generally I present certain those evidences of what we call as economic downturn. And then second part I'll go to our macroeconomic theory. There has been a slowdown, market slowdown in the past 2 years, and which is becoming a serious concern. To begin with, India is still supposedly growing at 6.2% in the first 2 quarters, and as Professor Govindra has said, that the projections are that it may even go down in the next 2 quarters, and probably about 5.8 is what most optimistic number with which Indian economy may be judged as being grown in the current year. Of course, there had been a controversy whether what has been the methodology of this growth rate, because whether growth rate has been overestimated. It is by 2%, 2.5% by Arvind Subramanian, who is former Chief Economic Advisor. And if that is so, then perhaps what he himself said is that the actual economic growth is about 4.2%. And which means that we have gone to pre-1980s level of economic growth. The allegation that economic growth is overestimated is actually dates back even as back as 2004 itself. Professor R. Nagaraj of Siddik R has written in Hindu also that there has been certain overestimation in the service sector, real output of the service sector, because we don't have first of all, we don't have a price index for the for the service sector. And then the benchmark methods which we use, there has been a general tendency of an overestimation of service sector, and not only in India but actually across the globe. So there is an issue whether a service sector led economy, whether are we in a position to actually ascertain the real economic output. There has been serious issues about it. But why they become interesting is that if you discount all that, then we can understand easily, much more easily. There is consistency between the economic downturn and fall in employment and fall in consumption, etc. But if we somehow maintain this, that economic growth is 6.2%, then it really comes in the way of understanding the shrinkage of employment, shrinking of consumption, etc. But if you accept that actually that itself is overestimate, actually the economic output has been coming down, then perhaps it is consistent with the other macroeconomic variables. So this is what you see in the data, that the revised estimates. These are the growth rates that there has been a last 2 years since 2016 to 18 from 8.17% to 6.81% official figures show, and the pre-2008 crisis, the growth rate is shown as 8.6%. According to old methodology, it is about 9 and above 9, but with the revised methodology, they show that pre-2008 growth as slightly lesser, not 9 but 8%. So that the NDA1 growth is slightly higher than the UPA growth rate. Let us take it that given all its overtones, but after 2000, from 2008-9 to 2010-11, there has been some sustaining of the growth rate at a cost of massive tax concessions given to the corporate sector by then the finance minister Pranab Mukherjee. But finally, after 2010, the slide began, and 2011, it went to 2011-12, it went to 5.24%, and again, it slightly sliding back to 2016. Even if you accept this as, but then last 2 years there is a slide, it has been coming down, and it looks as if this slide is unlikely to stop. So you can also see the manufacturing sector, which is circularly have been declining, especially since 2015, and this is a very prime concern that manufacturing sector, the decline is being marked by the decline in manufacturing sector. And in the current quarter, manufacturing sector is at 0.02%. And if you see the other allied sectors to industry, in industry especially, you can see that electricity industry has, the output has come down from about 14% to about 6%, and it is declining. So normally, if the power sector output, if it is going down, that means power demand must be going down. So it is one of the very important symptoms of lack of demand in the economy, especially industrial demand. And mining, quarrying, which has gone up for some little bit between 2014 to 15 or 13 to 15, even that has begun to come down. So there is certain across the important core sectors, there has been a decline. And you can see that from 2007-8, the peak rates, growth rates, the industrial growth rates based on index of industrial production, you can see they're all coming down. And in the last 1 year, particularly, there is a sharp decline in the non-oil exports from 5.7% to 2.5%, and non-oil inputs from 13.6% to minus 6.6%. Non-oil exports have fallen from 5.7% to 2.5%, and industrial production is from 5.2% to 2.5%. So these are all the symptoms of a serious downturn, and if they continue, then they may slide into the negative rate, and therefore may lead into a recession, even according to its own definition. Honestly, on a lighter note, some people say that what is a recession? If our neighbor loses a job, we call it a recession. If we lose ourselves a job, we call it depression, hope. It's all perception, matter of perception, just to say that. That there is neighbors losing a job is somewhere, I think, happening, and hope we don't lose our own job. And the main important reasons for a growth rate to come down is, as all of you know, that investment is a prime factor behind any growth. And so you can see that the capital formation has been falling from a peak of 25% in 2007. Now it has fallen almost to about 15%, 17%. So this is one more. And so there is a gross capital formation, which is the primary, primary factor in the growth, has fallen, and almost halved. And we know that ever since global financial crisis has hit the world in 2009, the gross investment has been falling, but it has sharpened its fall. There was a recovery in 2008-9, and as I said, because of the policies of certain tax concessions given, and at a huge cost of raising the fiscal deficit at the time, 9%, where fiscal deficit is supposed to have gone to 9%. Some growth was maintained, but that was proved to be unsustainable, largely because global trade has been going down. All of you should note that if at all Indian economy grew very fast during 2003 to 2009, it was also a phase when the global trade has grown at 16%, a whopping 16%, and now that has fallen to 3%. So when world is growing, that's when it is possible for us to go and participate in also increase our exports. If the global trade is shrinking, then in such a circumstance, if we have to increase our exports, then we have to displace somebody, which is even more difficult than otherwise. Even a growing world, then you have to be competitive, and there is some space because new markets are developing, etc. And the existing exporters cannot meet. Therefore, some space will be created for your own country to go and do some exports. But if the world economy is shrinking and global trade is shrinking, then unless you displace somebody, it is not possible for you to actually increase. So hence, we are in a very difficult situation of when the adverse global trade, global economic growth is happening. Then if we cannot increase our exports, then of course our ability to import also will go down, and therefore our trade deficit is likely to widen. Therefore, it may result in sharp depreciation, and depreciation is not helping exports to go up. Once again, just to believe that depreciation alone will always help the exports is also being proved to be not very unreliable, that depreciation of exchange rate alone will not work. What else, what will work is perhaps is much more difficult question to answer, but at least to know that depreciation which is happening and which has happened in the last 2 years very drastically. In fact, that did not help. But imports have become more costlier, and therefore imports have fallen, and therefore when imports have fallen, then again the effective demand is also falling as a result. So therefore there is a clear evidence that capital formation has been falling, and net FDIs, which have steadily also came down from 2008 and slightly improved during 2014-16, but now they are also declining. Hence FDI, despite our Make in India campaign, etc., do not seem to be a very promising option to boost the growth as such. And the third important factor perhaps is that for the growth is, after investment and exports, is consumption. And frankly, we have, according to the latest 75th NSS survey on consumer expenditure is supposed to have been withdrawn by the government because of data discrepancies. But Business Standard has leaked parts of the survey on last Thursday and show that average amount of money spent per person has dropped from 1,500 in 2011-12 to 1,446 in 2017-18, is about 3.6% in the rural areas. And in the urban areas, there is a slight increase of 1.9%. The problem, of course, we don't have any other source of data to know about consumer expenditure because consumer expenditure, if it is what we actually hear from the reports from the company data about how FMCG products sales have been going down, biscuit sales have been going down by, that's what Britannia company has claimed. That soaps and serves, the soaps and detergents, which normally don't go down, even their sales have been going down. So that means that the rural consumption has drastically has come down and has been considerably going down. Normally this does not happen in the last 15 years. In the last 15 years, ever since economic reforms have been introduced, the consumer demand has been going down. That is actually one of the marginally, even the rural consumption has gone up, which is despite the inequality, etc. But the absolute consumption levels have gone up, which is perhaps normally hailed as a marker of a success of economic reforms. But there has been a prosperity, and that prosperity to some extent has also gone to the rural areas, which is an undeniable fact. And we have seen that even the poorest of the households in the poorest of the states in India also have increased their consumption in terms of consumer durables and consumption goods and so on. So it is therefore reliable, but this has to be sustained. As the economic growth has to go on, the consumption should at least, the rate should sustain, it should not fall. So if the consumer expenditure is falling, that is a very ominous sign. It's a very ominous sign. And if consumer expenditure is falling, and then if investment expenditure is falling, aggregate demand is falling. That's what we study in our classrooms. C plus I plus G. G, of course, Gundravat has to tell us what's happening to the government expenditure. It is going up during certain years, but it is studied more or less, and there are limits, and exports are not growing, and therefore G is not likely to go up. Probably, I would say that there are certain ideological reasons also. That possibly, if 3 decades ago, it would have been much more easily acceptable for the government expenditure to go up. Now it is not possible. It is not possible anymore. And I'll come to that a little later. So this is the consumer expenditure data, and there also reports that the bank credit also has been falling, and there's no takeoff from the banks. And in fact, there is slightly perhaps the certain battle went on between Ministry of Finance and RBI from 2014-15 onwards, when the decline started around 16, and Ministry of Finance kept on actually insisting RBI to reduce interest rates, and Raghuram Rajan refused to reduce interest rates on the ground that the health of the banking sector is not good, and if in such situation, if the interest rates are reduced, then they will create even more NPAs. So he said that until the NPAs are taken care and the system is put in place, he said that he is not going to expand credit much, and he has to leave perhaps his office because there was a pressure on him to reduce interest rates. And he, on the other hand, said that why don't you reduce taxes, and reducing taxes is an alternative for you. Ministry of Finance can do it, fiscal rollback, and thereby give sufficient surpluses to the industry for the investment to grow. But of course, it's not always easy for governments to roll back its expenditures, its taxes, because it has to roll back its expenditures. Because if it reduces its taxes, then the fiscal deficit is likely to go up, and therefore it is not easy. So that tussle went on, and finally, of course, the two the governors of Reserve Bank left the job, and we have seen that finally the the battle is also for the dividends of the Reserve Bank of India, whether they have to be retained for improving the health of the banks or they have to be transferred to the Ministry of Finance. And therefore we have a new governor, and I, with all apologies to Professor Govindarao, that we cannot understand these changes except in ideological terms. And why Shaktikant Das comes as a governor, and then apparently his specialization also is not economics. Anyway, that's maybe throwing too much mud, but thing is, we can see that immediately the kind of changes which Ministry of Finance had been asking, happening very, very successively. And there is now much more harmony between Reserve Bank and the Ministry of Finance. And of course, some say that this has compromised the independence of central bank. And for good or bad, I do not know. But the surpluses are, the dividends are passed. And again, what did they do with the surpluses? The surpluses could have been used for alternative purposes. The 1.5 crores about that. I do not know the breakup exactly how much. The tax when the corporate tax is rolled back to 25%, apparently about 1.37 lakh revenue is lost, and it is understood by common people like us that the dividends will be adjusted for this, so that the fiscal deficit is not affected. And I can be corrected if I am wrong, if I am totally wrong. This was largely the impression.
I'll make a correction. The loss estimated by the government is 1.42 crores, but the independent analysis shows that the loss is about 90,000 crores.
Yes.
Out of that, 42% is the loss to the states.
Okay.
The centre's loss is much less,
Okay.
and out of that, because of the reduction in the tax rate, the oil marketing companies' profits go up,
Okay.
and the dividend of the center goes up.
Okay.
The center is likely to lose just about 25,000 to 30,000 crores.
Only 25,000.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Now, there is a column on that written in Financial Express.
Yeah.
But sort of.
Let's hope that this will be realized, because
No. But the point
projections.
is, they are just creating a euphoria, saying that look, we are giving up so much.
Okay, and therefore giving. Well, of course, yeah. And as a result of this, it is again surmised that about 12 lakh crore savings are now with the corporate sector, and their gross profits. And with of this 12.5, so therefore there is no any liquidity crisis for the corporate sector. Why they are not investing? Normally when you don't invest, when you don't have funds, etc. But they have funds. They have some sheet of funds with them, but their confidence levels are low, and therefore they are not investing. And this is the time when our classical macroeconomic theory begins. What if the entrepreneurial class in capitalism loses confidence and their animal spirits become dull? What we should do is what our macroeconomic theory begins. I'll come to that. So there's been a fall in employment, and I'll quickly I'll wind up because I have just 10 more minutes and my second half of my presentation is still pending. So this is labor force participation in the last 2 years. The blue line is last year's 2016, and red line is 2017. And the labor force participation means per 100 days, how many days of employment an average worker is getting employment. So he is participating, at least for majority of the time. And then that has clearly fallen. And this is a very interesting thing. And then you can also see that from September 16th onwards, the labor force participation has fallen by about 8 to 9 days per 100 days, which is about 8%. And they have not recovered, whereas for urban areas, they have fallen but recovered to some extent in urban areas. That's what the data is showing, which is perhaps from a report which is, again, who has been largely affected by the demonetization effect. The data is suggesting that the youngest group seems to have lost much more, and they have of course recovered, but again from 15 to 19 the most affected, and then 20 to 24 are slightly less affected. So now let's go back and ask some fundamental questions about the kind of theory which we ask. Why do economic fluctuations actually happen? This is where our macroeconomic theory starts. Our macroeconomic theory is about what brings stability in the macroeconomy, because that's important for employment, for our lives, and so on. So it is the classic, it is the old paradigm was classical macroeconomics, which said that supply creates its own demand and you don't have to bother, because without really any desire to demand, why does anybody, in fact, whole output, how much output going to be produced, they source it from the labor market and how much labor supply is available, and assume that capitalist system has the incentive to absorb even the last employee which is out there. That is the assumption of the classicals. And hence, if somebody is unemployed, they are there only voluntarily. They are unemployed only voluntarily because they don't want to work for a lesser wage. And why? That's up to them. It does not go into the question. And it builds its theory on a micro foundation that everyone will decide a trade-off between work and leisure, and accordingly they will participate, and therefore whatever is visibly manifesting, we have to take it on the face of it as given, and we cannot go into question, and therefore most probably it is a voluntary decision not to work. So therefore amount of output that is produced in the economy depends on how much people want to work. If people don't want to work, we are going to have, it's a apparently very convincing logic that if we want to work, and that's how that much output we will produce. If we don't want to work, we are going to produce lesser work. But thing is, it's going to be stable. That's what they believed, that since taste and preferences and work leisure trade-offs are generally going to be steady, and hence output will not be fluctuating. And this is what they have. But then 1930 depression has proved to be otherwise, and the important policy outcomes that come from the classical understanding is that only real factors will determine the real growth, and hence monetary factors have no impact, money is neutral, and hence any attempt to increase money supply to stimulate output are not going to work. That's called classical dichotomy, all of you. The implication is that there is no need to intervene. That will be the accrued implication, and hence you have to wait for if there is any short-term fluctuation in the output, that could be because of temporary shocks, but it will recover itself. You just have to wait. That is the approach. That is the classical approach. But then the welfare costs, probably true that in the history of capitalist growth, there are several downturns, but especially before, let's say, 1930, there was no concept of a state intervention as such. And capitalism has been growing since 1830, and it kind of a sophisticated capitalism. From 1830, if we talk about Western capitalism, 1830 to 1940, there are several ups and downs, and economies always went down and created havoc in the people's lives, but again they recovered. And we don't know what kind of havocs they have actually created, but it is understood that over period that the welfare cost of that downturns is going to be severe, or always severe. It falls on the people, they absorb. Maybe it falls on women, it falls on rural areas, etc. So it is 1930 depression has, of course, what will pull up the economy? Some innovation, some technological innovation, some finding of new markets, finding of new raw materials, all those things are going to pull all the economies out again. But until then, sometimes it will be too costly. And by the time, in fact, even countries may collapse. Politically, they may collapse. So that's exactly the situation. And 1936, Keynes, for the first time, he supported. Politicians actually reacted much before than the economists. Economists in 1936, they remained, said, no, we can't, Pigou and all, they said that no, we can't intervene, we should not intervene. And if we take away the resources, then the resources which the private sector would have used, the crowding out effect will happen, and therefore there will not be net effect, will be neutral or will be worse. So that was the thinking, and but it is politicians who had to act, because the nations are about to crack, then they could not afford, and therefore it is Roosevelt who started New Deal program, and Lloyd George started this public works program in London, and this is all, unfortunately the younger generations do not know. Older generations, we read it, and now it's a past for us, but sometimes past will always keep coming back. So then the Keynesian argument is that the animal spirits, when they are dull, you have to intervene, because the economic fluctuations are quite common, they are not abnormal. Because the planned demand may, if it goes below the actual demand, then it will end up with inventories in the companies and losses and so on. So therefore they will scale down their expenditure. If they scale down their expenditure, so that the planned demand go even further, planned investment go further even down, and it will create worse. And therefore there is no way a capitalist economy will come up. Therefore, when there is once a downturn starts, we do not know where it stops. It may go to one of its most terrible points. So therefore, it is important to intervene, and perhaps in the interest of the capitalist economy, it is important to pull it up. But then all such, I will not go that there are, about crisis, Marxist theories have been even more worked out theories, and what types of crisis actually can happen, and but lack of time, I will not go. But then what we all have to understand is that once the Western capitalist economies have recovered from the slump of 1930s, and then had a steady growth rates from 1945 to 1965, then because of course Keynesian policies were actively followed, and it was also a period when European reconstruction was going on after the Second World War, and then all the demand finally started going down, and then they also started again facing the same problem. Problem is about the demand. And by that time, of course, there was inter-country rivalry, and there was competition within the capitalist countries, and one thing which the establishment did not like about Keynesian policies was that the tax rates have gone up. But frankly, there are enough evidences that tax rates also have gone up because of the two world wars within the developed countries. The First World War and Second World War have led to high tax rates, because they had to really pay back, they create deficits. And at the same time, they really had to also implement welfare economy, and because without welfare economy, capitalist economies, the political equilibrium of the capitalist economies proved to be unsustainable. They were seriously threatened by a socialist threat. So therefore, they really had to make up for the debt which is created because of the wars which were fought between themselves, and then at the same time also bear a certain social welfare cost. All that has definitely led to higher tax rates. But then, perhaps capitalist economies are bound to be in some crisis. Is there a guarantee that they will always go with the same amount of prosperity? One day or the other, because of the kind of contradictions it has got, they will face. And Keynesian economics offered a solution in the short run, and perhaps Keynesian economics does not have the guarantee that in the long run the growth rates will always go up. So this is a reality of capitalism, and how much theoretically different schools of thought try to reconcile with this larger reality that a constant growth rate is a high growth is perhaps not guaranteed. And not only that, of course, Solo has said that it will settle down to a population rates of growth, but then there is no guarantee to even that. It may actually slip down more than, for example, Japan in the last 1 decade has got almost 0% growth rate, which is less than its population growth rate. And hence, and then if I speak about all southern European countries, they have low growth rates and high unemployment rates. So there is a good amount of capitalist economies are actually undergoing a crisis of low growth and high unemployment. And the established view, especially new classical school and real business cycle school, have re-theorized the argument that only supply side factors are adequate to maintain the growth rate. Why? Because they said that, once again, same old, that there is something called natural rate of unemployment, beyond which you cannot really push people to work. And there is, when we said full employment, even Keynes did not meant 100% full employment. There will be 4 or 5% natural rate of unemployment, where people will be searching for jobs and getting retrained, etc., etc. Okay, I think that should be enough. So people will be retraining themselves, and therefore that 4%, 5% should be allowed, as we should not push the economy beyond that and to pump run the economy. But there is no such 4 or 5% as standard rate of unemployment, natural rate of unemployment, which is proved in the practice. And British economy slipped to 11% and so on, and now the Greek economy is now down to 25% unemployment, which is the natural rate of unemployment. Can we ever determine it? And these are some kind of mythical things which have come up from the works of Milton Friedman, and his disciples continue to work on these imagined explanations that we will work more only if our real incomes increase. So only technological innovations will increase the productivity, and then only those productivity changes will give incentives for people to increase their work participation. And therefore, what we should do is only supply side reforms for the growth to kick off. That is the kind of a message which the theories have began to peddle. And so you have new classical school, you have got which talks about intertemporal substitution of leisure and work, and that of Prescott and Kydland and Prescott, the theories of real business cycle school. They also say that there will be permanent and temporary shocks, and each shock will alter our work-leisure ratios. So sometimes positively, sometimes negatively. If a productivity shock is given, then we will tend to work less, but because of the productivity, that amount of output will continue. But these are all proved to be extremely fallacious theories. In practice, in empirical realities, absolutely does not support this. And Keynesian intervention probably is the best bet for a recovery, but there is a severe class contradiction between whom the money should go. If there is, state has to take some money and spend, on whom it should really go. If you have seen that money is taken from RBI, how immediately it went to corporate sector, because that depends on the class power. They could have spent it on NGNREG, they could have spent it on expansion of credit education, rural electrification in many, Karnataka, etc. There is no rural electrification. There are corporations which don't work, which for rural electrification, on which Professor Govindra was cracking a joke that neither rural nor electrification about it. Unfortunately, they are not working. You can make them work. It is not a pretext to close them down. So the disinvestment for what was a very important question. How do you going to use those proceeds? But the conservative theories say that don't spend on people, give it to corporates. This is the ideological frame in which the present capitalist order actually is working. And they think that it is capitalists who run the system and they need therefore incentives. Unfortunately, that is not the reality. It is actually the working class which run the system, and it is capitalists who get the credit. But reality is always, every capitalist will say, I am giving employment to 1,000 people. That's what a capitalist will boast. But actually, 1,000 workers sustain the capitalists. That is actually the reality. But the reality is always seen upside down. And therefore, even the reasoning also looks upside down. We think that industry captains are the ones who are going to take decisions. It looks as if it is, but in the game of capitalism, unless it is profitable, they won't take. And therefore, there are certain different dynamics which are beyond their personal decisions and their personal whims and fancies, which actually determine, with which they are myopic and they are not ready to see it. So there is this contradiction, this fallacy of composition between what an individual thinks, what a society needs. That actually leads to a contradiction that leads to the problem, which the mainstream economic theory is not ready to look at. And therefore, mainstream economic theory is in a crisis. The crisis, therefore, is not only an empirical crisis, there is also a crisis of understanding, there is also a crisis of economic theory. So, normally, this is different from what we, in textbooks, we learn. In textbooks, we only learn and we write exams and we come out. But actually, the textbook economics are the most dangerous ideas which are being fed to our minds and which will make us feel that whatever is happening is normal. If they are not intervening, that is normal. If they are reducing corporate tax rates, that's normal. And if incentives are given to the industrialists, but they are still, and we expect that very soon the economy is going to kick off, that's normal. So this particular normalization that takes place through an ideological aspect in textbooks and theories and so on. Also, we sometimes we will have to go back and look back and rethink about these theories. And I thank you very much for the organizers for giving me this opportunity. And if I crossed my limit by some few minutes, my apologies.